Welcome to Conversations from the Continent with the Movement for Economic and Social Development in Africa, MESDA. This is a platform where we engage with Africa's most inspiring thought leaders, professionals, and doers that are driving transformation on the continent. On this podcast, we tell African stories, discuss solutions for African challenges, and shape positive African narratives to mentor and inspire our listeners. On this season, we will cover a wide range of topics across different fields, including entrepreneurship, healthcare, activism, nonprofit work, entertainment, climate change, and politics. My name is Meamande Mukwamba, and I am your host. We have a very special guest on today's episode. None other than Princess, Dr. Ambassador Inonge Mbikusita Lewanika, a royal, a diplomat, an author, a veteran politician, and an educationalist. She is a member of the royal family of Barotseland. She has served as ambassador on many fronts and was also recognized by President Hakainde Hichilema for her exemplary diplomatic service. For almost 60 years, she has been a champion of peace and the rights of women and children. She's ambassador to many, but to me, she's Kuku. So I'll say Kuku for Kuku. Welcome to Conversations from the Continent.
Thank you very much. I am delighted for this invitation, and I am happy to share some of the experiences and knowledge that I've gained by God's grace. Let me start first of all by congratulating your leadership and the Movement for Economic Social Development, MESDA, for your approaching first anniversary. So congratulations.
Thank you
I think
much.
You are on the right. Yeah, no, congratulations. It's good. I think your movement is sort of original and it's really targeting what we need to discuss, not only to discuss, but also to do. Go ahead.
I was going to ask before we get into the nitty-gritties of the subject, for the benefit of our listeners, maybe we can learn a bit more about your journey. And we have an icebreaker on the show where we actually want to learn more about African names and what they mean. So maybe if we can take a quick detour and ask if what does Inonge mean? What does Mbikusita mean? What does Lewanika mean in terms of African names and their meanings? That's our icebreaker on the show that we usually ask every guest, just to get to know our guests a bit more before we get technical.
I just thank God. I thank God that I was raised by Africans who were very happy to be Africans. They had no apologies for being Africans. And I grew up in Kitwe, Usakile African Township, but our parents always took us back to the village. And in my years, the village was so much better than urban areas. The love and the care from the people, even the food that you found in the villages, in the Mulunga, in the Alui, was nothing compared to what you found in Usa. We always ran there. We were loved, we were hugged, we were put on laps. A very rich upbringing. And psychologists have proved that, what an American has told us, that it takes a village to raise a child. That love and care from the collective, my parents, siblings, and they loved us, they put it on their lap. That makes your foundation as a child.
Very true.
Very firm. Development was total development.
Yes.
Now, my name... And by the way, I love Africa with my whole heart. And by God's grace, I have actually worked in 42 African countries. Amazing. Through the UN, and of course visited many. I love Africa. I love African languages because the African languages are really rich and our names tell a story. And they connect us, they enhance relationships, and They extend a relationship from one generation to one generation. I met a young man in Nairobi many years ago, and he said his name was Wangerwa. Immediately, I knew he was from Naluya clan, and I know the history.
Right.
So, for example, in our setting, if you say my name, Inonge Mbikusita Lewanika, people know my mother, her brothers, her sisters. They will know my father, his father. So these names tell a story. They connect us. They
Yes.
keep us. They keep us connected. So anyway, to come back to your icebreaker, Inonge means. In fact, these names also have proverbs. Mine is Inonge Mayo. Silwana samunene muko.
Okay.
Asikatu wa mabanga. Konji moli. What it said, Inonge is a precious, like a precious pottery, is precious to be handled by royal people and those who are loved by royalty. It's like a fragile, my friends have always laughed that there's nothing fragile about me. But I think every human being is fragile inside. That's how the Lord. So that's what, so in short, Inonge means precious. So when your name means precious, it sends a message already to yourself, to your inner self, to your social being, to your emotional being that you are precious.
Yes.
Now, Mbikusita means crashing armies, like an army, Mpi. Mpi, as you know from Southern African languages, Mpi is an army. So Mbikusita means crashing armies. That means strong, courageous, bold, defeating enemies and anybody who's against your destiny.
Right.
In Lewanika is actually a nickname that was given to my grandfather, King Lewanika. His name at birth was Lubosi. And it has a proverb in Siluyana, which Lubosi means like somebody is holding your hand tight, grasp, a very firm grasp. This lady, my grandfather's mother's name was Inonge. She could not have children. And in that generation, this is many generations ago, in the early 19th century, not to have children was really a disadvantage.
Right.
Because children perpetuated your heritage. Children were your social support system. Children were your insurance. And children were sent to the village. So every home brought children, preparing for the next generation. So she was scorned. So her answer was, if God has a firm grasp, Luboshirwa Nyambe. Nyambe is God.
Yes.
If God is holding something, has held you, who can untangle you from that grasp, that God? So in other words, she was saying, it is God's doing. But thank God, she eventually had 4 children. And among these 4 children came the greatest king of Barotseland. The one we remember today, what he has done is evident. Even physically, it's there, what he has done. And he was a man of vision. Anyway, so we go back. Anyway, so that is Luboshi, his original name. Lewanika, he was very progressive. He wanted to develop his country in many ways. And he was looking for where he can find schooling and education literacy. But he was inspecting what the people stand for. First, actually, he got in touch with Ethiopian missionaries. He was very African, actually, an Africanist. No wonder he has raised the Africanist.
Yes.
So he contacted the Ethiopian missionaries because there was an empire and they were Africans, wanted to exchange and learn from them. And on their way from Barotseland, they were ambushed by the Boers in South Africa, who ransacked their coaches, their transport, and took everything. And they didn't have spares. So that was the end of the missionary of Ethiopia. And then he through consultation with the kings of Lesotho, Mushweshwe and Kama of Botswana, they agreed that the Paris Evangelical Missionary Society and also friendship with the British was the first. He was so progressive. He wanted schools, he wanted canals, he wanted bridges, just to make life better for the people. And his policy was, nobody is allowed in his kingdom unless they are coming to bring something positive or to teach something. So Indians and Portuguese were not allowed to come because they were coming for their personal. The Portuguese were abducting people into the slave trade. The Indians were coming for their own trade. So he said he doesn't want people like that. He wants people who are going to add value to the lives of his people and his own life. So the first missionary to be accepted was 1885. The first sermon was preached in the palace.
Okay.
But initially when they told him about God, he said, we know all about that already. So just next point, literacy is what we want. But in the conversation, he saw that, yes, they believed in God, but there was this media of entry into the kingdom of God, Jesus missing. So yeah, he accepted that. And then his first priority was schools. So even these early missionaries, he told them, we just don't want a church, but we want a school, we want a health center. So when he introduced the schools, the people were not happy because they were afraid to send their children to a collective place. They were afraid of the Portuguese slave traders who were abducting people, especially children. So they refused to send their children there. But he was so determined about schooling and education, he opened his own school. Fortunately, he had a lot of children. He had 12 wives officially and, of course, concubines. So he enrolled his own children. So his vision was so strong, and he knew that it was good for the people. So he went ahead by demonstrating so that they can see the results. So the first school is the Barotseland, involved both girls and girls. This is in the 1890s. Girls went to school.
Right.
So eventually, when the people saw that it was good to go to school, that is when they sent their children to school.
Interesting.
And he told the missionaries, don't just build a church. We need a church, a school and health center, and don't all be in Mongo. Go to all the districts where they have not heard the word of God, whether they have no schools, whether they have no health center. Go there and do these things. So the first district hospital, Lewanika Hospital, was built in 1923 by the local people using local materials. Again, the view of the administration at that time was educate the people so that they can do development themselves. So that hospital is over 100 years today. It's 101, was built by local people using local materials, no donors. But then when the hospital was finished, they didn't have personnel. And he was very strong on partnership, which we talk about today.
Right.
So the Catholic Church had come to Barotseland some years later, and they had some health workers. So the first hospital, 100 years ago, the first health workers at Lewanika Hospital, 101 years ago, were Roman Catholic nuns. But he just didn't sit there. He was training his own people also as health workers. Both men and women were working at Lewanika. It's a district hospital. So he invited, in partnership with the SDA, the Sabbath Adventist, to open up Kalabo, which celebrated 70 years. So it was also built before independence. Again, a school, a health center, and a church. And SDO, he sent them also to the Sioma part. And then the Roman Catholics also went to the other. He encouraged them, go out where the word of God has not been preached, where there's no school, there's no health center, and there is no church. Go there. So he was trying to get these essential corners of development all over the kingdom. And we can see we are struggling to do that. But this man who died in 1916 did this in the 1890s. And he did, partnership, enlightening and educating the local people and using local resources. That's what he's done. Exactly. No donors, no importing things from another country, that kind of thing. And maybe since you mentioned development, and we do understand, I think, development differently, maybe we can look at the definition of development so that we are on the same page.
Yes.
Well, development is changing the situation. And I have added my own. I have added to the definition to say it's changing the situation for better.
Yes.
Not only because change can be in reverse or it can be in sideways. It can go in circles.
It can.
So I want to add. I want to add the changing situation for the better, or for an individual, her or his family, his village, his community, his nation, and the world. I think sometimes we don't realize the impact we have on the world. Whatever we do, we need to be conscious. First of all, of course, you can't improve anybody until you improve yourself.
Yes.
So again, we usually forget about the individual. We point at other people, and we even point what they should do, and we don't point what we should do.
Right.
So this change for the better needs to start with the individual, and the people who are closest to you are family, your neighbors. If you live in the rural areas, it's your village, your community, your nation, and the whole world. I think if we realize that everything we say and do, even think, has an impact, positive or negative, on your family, yourself, your country, and the world, we would be very careful about what we say and what we do. So we have agreed that
development
is changing the situation for the better.
Yeah.
This change for the better is physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's intellectual, it's social. So it's the total development.
Right.
The transformation of the whole being. If you can just change, you can change by roads and infrastructure, by water and health, and still have rotten human beings. I heard an American talk about Africa, that it's very background. They don't have skyscrapers. Cement doesn't change your heart. So that's why when we talk about development, we have to talk about development of the person in totality.
Right.
The spiritual part is very critical. The physical, the emotional, the social, and the mental. The social development, if it's not there, it can mess you up. And of course, if the mental development is not there, then you won't get far. And actually, what is the foundation and key is the spiritual development, because that is where you get the transformation of the heart, the love, the compassion, the care of the other people. So that is my total definition. Okay, so we are talking about African names, which are loaded with so much meaning that connects your relationships, that give you wisdom, Okay, so the next name we are looking at is Lewanika.
Yes.
King Lewanika, as I've already explained, he was so progressive. He had such a vision. And the people were afraid, of the Portuguese traders. And the other thing that he was very strong on is agriculture. As you know, Barotseland, there's a Barotseland. That's why the Zambezi floods. Yes. So he did mounds, Mounds. I speak Zambian, yes, so sometimes mounds. I have to spell.
Yes,
mounds, those little hills.
Yes.
He did them in the Barotseland for agriculture, so that as the water is going down, they utilize that, because the Barotseland is more fertile. So agriculture was continuous. You are talking about winter maize. It's not old. King Lewanika did that already. Right. So he did these mounds all over the Barotseland so that they can be cultivating throughout the year. So he was doing so many exciting things development-wise that the people couldn't keep up. So they decided that they didn't want him as king. In fact, they wanted to kill him. But he escaped. And he escaped near the Angola border. So he actually entered Angola.
Okay.
And while he was there, as Rubosi, a king who had fled from his people, and it's not a majority of the people, it's his core rulers, the Indunas, we can call them ministers now, who didn't want progress. So when he arrived in Angola, he was a natural leader somehow. So all those groups, somehow, they came to him. He was advising. He suddenly, like David in the Bible, all those people came around him. And they gave him the name Lewanika. And if you love Africa and you love African languages, and listen to the Bantu, Nika is a Bantu word for land. Lewanika. It means somebody who unites nations, somebody who unites people. So it's the people in Angola who gave him the name Lewanika. And then what happened after some time, the same people who wanted to get rid of him, of course, they couldn't find somebody as a capable leader. They came back to get him. And he refused. He refused to go. But then they said, either you come with us or we will kill you. So that's how he went back to be king and received the missionaries and a lot of progress and development that we have today. He started it himself and left it. Now, that's on my father's side.
Right.
You know, we are in an era of gender balance, and it's not new. If you look at the kingdom of Barotseland, and many kings, many kingdoms, even in Kenya, they had a ruler who was a woman.
Yes.
West Africa, you have all these rulers who are women.
Yes.
So the first ruler in Barotseland was actually a woman. Again, if you love African names, you can see Mbuyu wa Mwambwa, you know. So that was the first ruler. The Majesty was a queen. And the only reason the system went back for the Litunga to be male is because the first ruler only had 2 sons. So one of these sons became king. And then somehow it turned out that now it's men who are the Litunga. So even this gender balance, actually, I know in Beijing in 1995, we fought for gender balance and we keep fighting. If we look at our traditions, it's there. It's there. As I told you that even in Kenya, even in Zambia, you have Chief Nkomesha, you have Chief Chawa. They've always been there, even before independence. They actually command more respect than the government. You know, even the government kneel at their feet. And now some of them are kneeling for other things. But originally, it was kneeling for respect and to respect the authority. So women in Africa have always been in governance. But we were colonized, and the colonized system had no women. Then they imposed their system, which had no women. All right. Anyway, we won't go there, to be continued another day. Now, that is on my father's side.
Right.
Now, I go to my mother's side. My mother's side, her maiden name is Ngumbi. It was actually Maiwe, but again, there was a name change. You see, the names also record events and history. You know, so what the new people need to do now with your information technology, change this into recorded, documented history. But our people already had it. They had it in names of places, names of trees, names of people. So my mother's father was Maiwe. He worked with King Sipopa, another king in Barotseland, who was based in Sisheke. He was, one of his close allies and counselors, and then they kept moving from place to place. So when he finally was headed to Lialui, my grandfather said he's tired of moving around. He's going back to his village. And in those days, when the king says something, you have to obey. And it's not so much dictatorship, because most of what the king said was good for the government, good for the people. You know, like even in the Queen of England, they say we have it in command. You know, they don't say we invite you. They say we have it in command. I remember the first invitation I had from the late King Mushweshwe of Lesotho. He was inviting me for dinner, and the invitation said we have it in command for you to come to dinner. But also it is spiritual. You know, when God, who has authority, is not a dictator. When he tells you to do something, it's for your good.
But it's
for
command.
good of other people. So when this king said that you have to come with me and advise me and work with me, it was not personal. It was good for the people. But somehow my grandfather was tired of moving around, and he says, I'm not coming. So some people sneaked in and told him that tomorrow you are going to be killed. Who heard that. So this was in the Mongo area. So when he heard that, he headed towards the Zambezi. And then sure enough, the people were after him. So my grandfather, when they reached the river, he just dived in the Zambezi River and came out on the other side. And then that's how he became Ngumbi. Ngumbi is a name of a bird, B-I-R-D. Again, I'm spelling because I speak Zamlish. Because for me, a bed you sleep in and a bed you fly, I say it's the same. Because I know 7 languages in Africa before I learned English. So this is B-E-R-D, gets in the
bird.
the bird that flies.
Yes.
My grandchildren and children can say that better than me. So this BIRD gets into the water, dives in, and comes out far away. So he was given the name Kangumbi. But then he was now honored as courageous, somebody who can say no to the king and still survive. So that name again recognizes boldness. It recognizes courageousness. It also recognizes your own what you believe in. If you are tired, you are tired. So that's how my mother and her siblings, their last name became Ngumbi, which means courageous and bold, able to stand up for yourself and for your rights. That's on my mother's side. So all these names are loaded, actually. And usually when I meet the young people in Zambia, I ask them, what does your name mean? They have no idea. I tell them, go to your parents, go to your grandparents, find out your name. Even your history, I tell these young people, you know, your great-grandfather might have fought even in World War I and II. He's a warrior. He's a hero. He helped liberate Europe. And here you are, you think you are nothing. So our history is very, very important.
Yes.
Because most of these destinies run from generation. And, you know, you look at me, my grandfather's name was somebody who unites nations. I worked for the United Nations. Most of my nature is working with people internationally, all over Africa, all over the world. So that name transcends from generation to generation.
Right. You know, you've covered so many important things which actually speak to the crux of this conversation. And I'll just highlight a few things that I wanted to clarify, you know, that you said that were very interesting. Firstly, I'll start by saying that this already feels like a full circle moment. You know, when you talk about, like you just said now, you know, sometimes you need to understand where you come from, because when you understand where you come from, you understand who you are. And even as you were saying that, I'm like, that's so true, because you were talking about how, you know, we're in the early 1900s, we're using local resources to build local schools without aid. There was this focus on development. And that's basically what we are doing even now. You know, so sometimes you think these ideas, even at MESDA, we do this sustainable empowerment, we do this use addressing local challenges with local resources. It's not necessarily a new idea, you know, it's a concept that has existed for a long time where we come from. So even for me already, I'm having that moment like, oh, I understand myself more by understanding, because I am Lozi, you know, so understanding my people and where I come from, it makes sense. And then also what I wanted to ask, that's very interesting. I've heard this before.
Let me just say something about knowing yourself.
Yes.
You see, you need to know your history. Because remember what was done in the 1800s and early 1900s. You are doing it now. You think you have discovered it.
Right.
That is because you don't know your history.
Yes.
Secondly, what happens, you know, the so-called colonizers are learning from us. They get our idea. And if you don't know, you are like winter maize. It's nothing. It was always there. But if you are just in Chawama, in Kablonga, you don't know where you come from, you don't know the system, they make you run around in circles with their ideas, which originally are yours. What we need are people who say, that's a great idea. Actually, my great-grandmother used to do it. You do. That means you are also contributing to development.
Yes.
Because the development now is all colonizers oriented, but they are copying ideas from us. And so it is critical to know yourself and your background and your history.
Right. This is just going to be I don't want us to open this because it's its own rabbit hole, but I think it's interesting to discuss. And I'm also asking for personal knowledge. It is recorded, or I heard anyway, and I read somewhere that the Litunga and the Barotse kingdom was one of the few African kingdoms that did not allow its people to be sold into the slave trade. And I think you spoke about that when you're talking about how the Litunga would pick out missionaries, and he had certain biases towards certain types of missionaries that were notorious for kidnapping people and selling them. Is it true that the Lozis actually did not permit any of their people to be slaves, or is this just a theory?
No, this is true. If you look even secondly at David Livingstone came to open up Africa for the route of mission work, but he was also chasing to fight against the slave trade. He passed through Barotseland. He actually met Lewanika as a young prince. I mean, this is God's destiny now. Because Lewanika received the gospel, and as a young man, he meets David Livingstone, who brought the gospel. David Livingstone, part of his mission to Africa was to stop the slave trade. He didn't stay in Barotseland because there was no slave trade. That's why he went, I think, to Mozambique. He went to other places. So that just confirms your idea. They had what we call, they had like servants who were slaves. You know, like those families, like
yes.
You have your household helper.
Serve, yes.
And
yes.
like now, I mean, after independence, most of the domestic workers, like cooks, were from Eastern Province, and that's colonial. We won't go into that right now. But then you
Right.
have like some people paid school fees for the children of their household help. They helped them. Then the children also became working for either their children. So what the missionary, they interpreted these as slaves. So at one point, all these were freed. Those domestic helpers who were there for a lifetime, and the second generation, the missionary thought they were slaves. So they were all freed. And some went and some refused. You remember, even in the Bible, when we talk about the Jewish Jubilee, which is in the Bible, when they were freed, some people were like part of the family. They were treated well, and they refused to go, but they stayed as members of my family. When my father was in Litunga, one of the ladies who worked at the palace came from that generation. Her mother was like a slave servant, but who refused to go when they were released. Sometimes you leave your home for a long time, you don't even know anybody, or you don't relate
Right.
to them.
Yes.
You are more like family that we had. So even those kind of generation to generation servants were stopped at that time. So it is true. David Livingstone didn't stay in Barotseland because there was no slave. And for your own information, King Lewanika's son, one of them was abducted. His name was Mananyanda. And my father has brought a book called Mananyanda, the son of Lewanika. You can't find it now, but I think you can find it at Northwestern University.
Interesting.
I'm still trying to trace the book. Mananyanda, the son of Lewanika, was playing with other boys. And he was abducted by the slave trade and sent towards to be sold in Angola. We don't know the mystery, how he escaped and came back to Lialui as an older youth. And in that area, before, they used to sharpen their teeth. That's another topic. The missionaries, the explorers condemned the sharpening of the teeth. But the story behind sharpening of the teeth was like some rare, rare diseases like COVID came, like meningitis, where the mouth can't open to buy even liquid. So those sharpened teeth, when they open your lips, they can pour in liquid through the sharpened teeth. Everything, even, look at tattoos. Some people had tattoos for ethnic, but now in Europe, they do tattoos all over their body. That is okay. And if we do it, it's demonic. But you see, so it is interesting that Lewanika, actually, the slaves were officially freed in his reign. But what is interesting is that his own son was stolen. So when he came back to Lialui, his mother was still there. The mother didn't recognize the son because now his teeth were sharpened. And he kept saying, "You are my mother." And the mother saying, "No, there's no way I can have a child with teeth like that." Then she remembered that her son had a scar on the thigh, when she opened the thigh, the scar was there.
That's how she knew.
The scar was just a natural scar. We don't know where it came from. I think one of those birthmarks.
Yes.
So that's how he was recognized. Mwananyanda. Let's look for that book. It's at Northwest University.
Yeah.
Mwananyanda.
We should find it.
That's the son of Lewanika, written by my father.
So, we've spoken about the pre-colonial era, and I think now we're kind of in the colonial era. And I have another question, which is looking at religion, which plays a very big role in society. And you said something again very interesting about how the king had said, we already know about God and literacy is what we want. And I've been doing quite a lot of research kind of on the history of Christianity in Africa, because for a long time, people always say that Christianity is a Western concept. And there's a lot of dialogue around, even as Africans now are kind of seeking their own emancipation, there's a lot of dialogue around, letting go. In this context, I'll speak of Christianity. I know there are many, we have listeners from everywhere who are of many religions, but Zambia is a Christian nation, so we'll speak of Christianity specifically. People are now talking about, abandoning Christianity because it's a Western religion. So even as you abandon these colonial mentalities, you must also abandon colonial beliefs. But then I've been doing reading around that, and Christianity and the belief in God already existed in Africa. I think it started somewhere in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian churches, and it was already on the continent even before colonial rule. What happened is that colonialists, for lack of a better term, manipulated Christian teachings to kind of perpetuate patriarchy, perpetuate oppression, perpetuate white supremacy, and that's where the things got blurred, but not necessarily that, Christianity didn't exist. And I think you've just also acknowledged that when you were giving us this historic account. So I wanted a bit more of your thoughts on that, just to confirm that, Christianity did exist. You mentioned something about how David Livingstone kind of introduced the concept of Jesus Christ being a medium through which people can access salvation. But already the idea was there. So what are your thoughts, and what is the position, at least in the context of Barotseland and maybe the Zambian context, and the historical, well-traveled and very learned on African history. What is the history there, and what is the true position?
Okay, I think it's really a genuine question. And it is a genuine apprehension. Let's start from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was born in the Middle East. So definitely he's not white color. He's not blue-eyed. He's not blonde, right?
Right.
We agreed on that. The Middle East are partly us and partly the other people. God in his wisdom made Jesus to be born in the Middle East, where all of us can identify with him. And those who have studied geography and territory said it was sort of a central route where if a message was put around there, it can go around the world. So the major problem that we have is Jesus being a Caucasian with blue eyes and blonde hair. He was not. So that is part of the problem. When you look at all the Bibles, all the literature, you see, in fact, I don't use the concept black and white. I don't use it. There's nobody who's white. If you have a white bed sheet or white piece of paper, there's nobody that color. There is also nobody black. So right there, anything white is pure and it is good, and anything black is bad.
Right.
So first you see they introduced Jesus as a colonialist. And then secondly, all the characteristic, what it means to be white and black is against us. Everything black, even Jesus, when he was born, he was rushed to Egypt to survive. The person who carried his cross was an African. Alexander, one of the first people who to spread the gospel, was a bishop in Egypt. He was an African. Tunisia church was very strong in the early church. It's Africa. So what I do understand how people are struggling, because you have a so-called white Jesus, and then they associate him with their culture and their way. So what they have taken the concept of Jesus Christ, and by the way, Christian is also misleading because it was a nickname. You remember, I think it was in Corinth, where when they saw these people who were not learned, being Christ-like, loving, compassion, knowledgeable, the Bible says they understood that they had been with Jesus. All right? Mm-hmm. So when you take Christianity and anglicize it and present it like that, that's where we have a problem. The other problem is that the missionaries were the first to come here. Now, remember, I did a master's paper on David Livingstone. And I did it to prove that he came here as a colonialist. But in the end, I was on my knees praying. The reason I wanted to prove that he came here more for Britain than for Jesus Christ is because he kept saying all over Africa, wow, this is a great land. It should grow cotton for Lancashire. Cotton was done in Lancashire in England, those factories.
Right.
But one thing for Christians to learn from Livingstone, he was looking at industry as part of the gospel, factories as part of the gospel. But then those who came after him said, you must be poor, no money, don't do business. You can see even Livingstone has this business concept. So the missionaries came first and opened the routes. Then the colonial government came, and because the missionaries related to the people, to the kings and the chiefs, so the colonial government came through the missionaries. They opened doors for them. They knew the people, they knew the languages, and those days, although even the colonial government later learned the local languages. So in the end, you couldn't tell, is it the gospel, is it the colonial? It became one.
Right.
The gospel of Jesus Christ and the colonial government, which was oppressive in many ways, which was looting Africa. Like, for example, in Zambia, look, when the government of Britain came, we have a railway line all the way from the Congo to Cape Town to take copper, right, out of Africa.
Right.
And then the villages were just left like that. So it's difficult to do that. I do understand. And then, by the way, Christianity is also politics everywhere. But this is what I want to say for Jesus Christ. It's a personal experience. You have to know that Jesus is not white, is not black. It is a spirit. And then the good thing about Jesus, you can challenge him. You can talk to him. You can ask questions. You remember when Mary in the Bible was told that she's pregnant, she asked, how can that be? So if you have a question about the problem with Christians and local government, read your Bible, ask Jesus personally. So when you experience Jesus personally, when you have an encounter with Jesus Christ, it has nothing to do with a skin color. It has nothing to do with a colonial. It's a personal experience. You need that encounter. If you just go to church and sit on the bench, then you will be misled. Yeah, it's a personal and it's a spiritual experience which translates into the physical. Because once you look at Paul, he opposed Christianity, as we can call it. Then he had an encounter with Jesus Christ. And that changed everything. Completely transformation. And that's development, by the way. When there is transformation, it's development. That is spiritual development.
Right.
And where you have spiritual development, it shows. That's why some of these missionaries, David Livingstone, his family died here. When I was trying to prove that he was a colonialist, I read his diaries. My goodness, that man was on his knees sometimes the whole night. He had an encounter with Jesus Christ. And it made a difference. He even died on his knees. There's one time when I was writing the paper, I was doing research at New York University. And I read of a time when he went into a hostile village and they were going to kill him. So he spent the whole night praying. And then the strategy he had was, he had people, by the way, that Chuma and Susie are from Barotseland. Those two people who went around with Livingstone and took his body when he died in Chitambo. They even went to England, taking those people are from Barotseland. Now I regret, my father even knew where their villages. But when they are gone, you say, oh my goodness, I should have asked that question. My father taught us a lot. For us, our parents were historians. They were busy, but we spent so much time learning about our history, and that kind of thing. So those Susi and Chuma are from Barotseland.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they walked. You see that again, the encounter with Jesus Christ after working with Livingstone. These two people carried the body by foot from Zambia to Mozambique, got on a ship, even got to Westminster where he was buried. And of course, the history of England does not even mention them. They are just mentioned scantily that they were with him. But it's our fault. By now, everybody should know that they come from Barotseland, but we don't. But anyway, so for those who have a problem, as a politician, of course, you can understand that I struggle. But we can relate that with Zambia being declared a Christian nation. So in 1991, I was actually a member of parliament of the original MMD, and I keep saying original MMD because what the other MMDs are very different. And in Zambia, we don't even make the difference. That is part of our challenge, and we don't record history, so we don't even know the difference between the original MMD and the other MMDs that came. Somewhere where you nip and just put on MMD uniform, and they call themselves MD, and you don't know the difference. Yeah. Right. So I am a member of the National Executive Committee, where it was agreed that Zambia is going to be declared a Christian nation. I was in Sinanga. I was not part of that movement. I was in Sinanga, my constituency, when it was announced, and there was a ceremony at the cathedral that Zambia is a Christian nation. Yes, so when Zambia was declared a Christian nation, the majority of Zambians were happy. Why? They were expecting Christian values, Christian language, Christian behavior, Christian government. Unfortunately, I'm telling you, I was a member of the National Executive Committee. Right. Just the opposite happened. The opposite happened. If we are really honest, corruption full scale was introduced or was heightened. Because also the president was a Christian born again and anointed and spirit-filled. They really were expecting Christ-like behavior, Christ-like administration, Christ-like love and compassion. And just the opposite happened. Right. The opposite happened. The corruption, even Parliament, we used to meet in the morning and afternoon. It was moved to afternoon and night because some of the senior government officials went into business. Zambia was privatized. Some of the government officials, when they privatized the buildings, they bought them. Nepotism was involved then. Marginalization, anybody who disagreed with them, even on health issues, was an enemy. So that added to a question mark about Christianity. So there's a difference between Jesus Christ and his followers. Huh? Right. It's like being an ambassador. When you are an ambassador, you are representing your country and you are representing the head of state. Yes. So they cannot be in Zambia. They cannot see the president. Everything you say and do and act, they judge Zambia by those standards. By your actions, yes. If you are a good ambassador, you represent the country and the president so effectively that the people can say that is what Zambia is like. Yes. So when you represent Jesus effectively in your speech, in your thinking, in your actions, in your character, how you relate to your friends and families, people will say that is Jesus Christ. Right. If you do the opposite, so where people get mixed up, it's between Jesus and those who represent him. Right. Some of the people represent Jesus very well, and those who represent Jesus very well, they attract people to Jesus. Right. Those who misrepresent him and just they hate other people, Zambia, even the divisions in Zambia were heightened during 1990, the one election, during the Christian era. That's when the divisions, NGOs were divided, the church were divided, those who were pro. Sometimes we look at the problems today. They started a long time ago, but we were quiet. Yes, many of these problems, some of them even started with UNIP. For example, they talk about what they're talking, diminishing democracy, squeezing. It started with UNIP. You remember all the political parties were banned?
Yes.
And then President Kaunda used to stand alone with hyenas and frogs. That is diminishing democracy.
Right.
And then UNIP Mulilo, Waswara Kwateni Wacha. All that is diminishing the democratic space. So what are you complaining about now? What did your parents say about that when it started? If we had started at that time to say this is not democracy, we wouldn't be where we are. But we usually, if it is somebody you don't like or they come from another region, that's when you see the problem. Diminishing democracy started with a UNIP government. We started with a multi-party, with African National Congress, with the rights of the head of the opposition, with a house and a car. It was like a ministerial. Those things were taken from him, and then the party was even dissolved. Then we went into a one-party state. So that is when we were killing democracy. So what are we talking about now? We are being selective. Anyway, go back to. So what the summary is this: if we find an encounter with Jesus Christ, Christ and those who represent them are different.
Yes.
If you, it's like I tell people, for example, if you find somebody who's beating their mother, you can't say, I don't believe in motherhood, because that one was beating his mother.
Good point.
It's up to you how you treat your mother. Don't worry about it. So many people go to church just to sit in church. But you see, also the Bible is alive. It can speak to you. And then Jesus is there, available for questions.
Yes.
A personal experience. When you have a personal experience, all this neo-colonialism, there's a difference between the colonial government and Jesus Christ. Even if they personalize it. They personalize it to take advantage of us, which was wrong. But what have we done since we discovered that they personalized Jesus?
Right.
What have we done? We have resources. We sent people to school. We have mining engineers. They are not in mining. They are not being consulted. Other people are coming from there. And there's nobody for Africa. Our traditional rulers before independence knew that. That's why they stressed education for their people and using those people who went to school and also using local resources. They didn't ask for donors because most of the partners are there for themselves. Nobody can leave their country and say, I love you so much when they have starving people in their countries.
Right. It's so interesting, and this has been such an interesting conversation for me, looking at the pre-colonial era, the colonial era, and post-colonial. And even when we talk about post-colonial, like the late 1900s, so this is now our transition into the early 2000s and where we are today. And I think I want us to now bring this entire discussion now and kind of apply it to where we are now in our quest for social and economic development. We've talked about indigenous local systems. We've talked about local empowerment. We've talked about indigenous knowledge generally. My question now is, and I think there are two questions that you can kind of answer at the same time as we conclude our conversation. One, do you think indigenous knowledge, as you've shared these systems, are they progressive or retrogressive for development in today's context? That's my first question. And then depending on how you answer, assuming that the answer will be yes somehow, because everything you've said has been extremely relevant to what's going on, how do we then build upon this knowledge and these systems to strengthen our contemporary development frameworks? So rather than us going to adopt, and I think that's a challenge we've had in Africa generally, where we are using we are trying to customize a Western concept in an African context. And we've seen that happen in the aid industry. We've seen that happen in politics. We've seen that happen in religion. We've seen in all aspects of society and even the economy, where even if it's building a business, you're trying to run a business as if it has certain systems that don't exactly, they are not cognizant of African systems and how we work and do business. What do you think is the way that we can advance development currently in the age of AI? Now we have cell phones, now we are connected, and there are a lot of Western systems that are now part of everyday life for Western. Anyway, let me not go down that rabbit hole, because even when we talk about Western systems, are they really Western to begin with? Which is something you touched on. But how can the modern development and traditional development come together? My question is all over the place, but I hope you kind of understand what I'm trying to ask.
No, I catch you, but I just want to finish about post-independence.
Right.
We've talked about pre-colonial, colonial, post-independence. Most of us in Africa and Zambia, we start with a first president. That's not post-independence. Well, it is post-independence flag-wise. Right. But when it comes from the liberation of Africa, like in Zambia, the first people before UNIP and Kaunda worked as a team. They were from all over Zambia. They worked as they didn't always agree, but they didn't get their grievances at home. So, and they were not working so that who is president. And they were doing practical things. They had their own jobs. They had their own houses. They were doing like a voluntary to liberate together. For example, my father's group was before Mr. Kapwepwe Komwe. We have Bokati Lungu. We have Reverend Kasokolo, who was a full minister of the gospel. Members of the legislative council. They were working as a team. And their emphasis was lobbying and convincing the other people. For example, Africans in parliament were represented by Europeans. And Europeans is what we call white today. The colonialists, whether they came from Europe or not, it was like a status symbol to say they are Europe. So European people represented us in our legislative council, which was like a parliament. What the original African National Congress, which my father was the first president, was negotiated peacefully without throwing stones and insults for Africans to represent themselves. That's how Mr. Chileshe, the first mayor, became a member of the Legislative Council, Mr. Sokota, Reverend Kasokolo. So and then they found, and you know what, King Lewanika was talking about school education in 1890. At the same time, Booker T. Washington in the US was fighting for the African Americans who were called Negroes to go to school. So the early people before Kaunda wanted to prepare independence by negotiating, by lobbying, and also by preparing people, sending. Most of these scholarships were found by my father to India, to the US, and to England. As part of the liberation, their spouses were teaching literacy to the women, so that when independence comes, you need literacy. You remember what King Lewanika was saying? We want literacy.
Yes.
In those days.
Yes.
So then the young people came, said this was too slow. They want independence now. It was violence, throwing stones. One poor lady was killed. And then they started fighting among themselves. UNIP and African National Congress, bloody violence. The women were not talking to each other because of parties. The children who used to play together no longer played. So that's post-independence. And the people who came after that, many of them were genuine, but some of them were there to be leaders. And then it became I, me, and myself. And then independence was translated to a house and a car and a position and free telephone and free that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that's when we started to lose it. The original people before UNIP, they were happy to be Africans. They knew what was positive about Africa. They wanted to add what they don't have. Those who got to be independent threw away everything that's African, maybe except singing at the airport and dancing. And then even the dance, we have different dances from different Zambia. It's one dance, everybody is the same. So, and then actually, if we analyze the situation, the colonial government had some kind of influence on who is president by and large. Those like our father's generation who said you can't touch our land and this is our system is good, we'll take from you what we don't have. They maneuvered, so very few of them became presidents. Those that they were comfortable with, I mean, like even President Kaunda had advisors, some from South Africa, some from England, you know, and they were in every ministry. So that is how we started dumping everything that's African. And then Zambia had a high rate of urbanization. And urbanization was equated like you are now no modern. A village was looked at like demonic, a very bad thing. Even if you have a traffic offense, the police said, what's wrong with you? Are you coming from the village? So everything village. Yeah, but you see now there is a reawakening about Chilangamlilo, Mateveto. Whether you come from that area, you understand. Because these people are starved. They got divorced from their culture and from their system. So now they are floating. And some of them have discovered everything Western doesn't help them. I just wanted to draw that distinction of who started the freedom fighters. They were Africans, happy to be Africans. They worked as a team. They were not vying for president. And they just wanted to add value to what they had.
Right. That's so interesting. And now, what are your thoughts on development today and how we can build on the knowledge that already exists, the systems, that the traditional systems that are already in place? How can we as young people who have been raised in this new Zambia, like you mentioned, which is very urban, but we are seeking to kind of go back to the roots and find out who we are as Africans and what existed before the urbanization of our thinking. How can we do so, and how can we connect the work we are doing today to the foundations and the frameworks, that the blueprint that already existed?
I think first of all, you need to know what the foundation is, and most people don't know.
Right.
Yeah, you need to know the foundation. For example, I'm saying about winter maize, it was already there. And generally, when we talk about development, it was always there. It was dynamic, it was changing, people were adapting. So we didn't have NGOs because the family and the village were part of the, non-governmental. Means, you have a government, a post-colonial government, which stops at the district. So from the district to the village, they have no representation. Then you have NGOs to try to fill the gap. And if they don't know the foundation, and then they are relying on donors. And the donors, when they go to campaign for their money, say everything African is bad and demonic, so that is where you start from. So you are completely off in the beginning. And right. Now, with the economic crisis all over the country, even the Western NGO, their survival right now is Africa. So when they get like $200,000, then they give you $2,000. Even the church, for example, I am in the rural areas of Zambia. There's a team to America to come and teach them. Every other week, a team is coming to teach them. They raise funds to come and teach them. That's how they pay for their tickets. That's how they support their ministries. How can you arrive in my village today and start teaching me tomorrow? And then another team comes. So these people in the rural areas, they are experienced, they are pastors, they are never given a chance to teach or share their experience. And if they do share their experience, it is stolen and repackaged. So, but if you don't know where you are coming from, you'll be floating with them. Africa right now is survival for the whole world. It's not only minerals, but even the church, even NGO. You notice some of these big ministries go to Nigeria and South Africa. The gospel I agree with, but why Nigeria, why South Africa? It's the population. They sell the books. It's a ministry of survival. So all that, we need to know the difference. It goes back to a personal encounter with Jesus Christ. But right now, Africa is the survival of everything. So now when we look at a village setting, I think you have heard, what is this terminology that the World Bank, safety nets. This is an African concept. You go to a village, there's a woman who's blind, or is an older, she has done her contribution. Now she can't go and collect water. She can't cultivate her field. All right, but she's supported by the village as a safety net. So when they observe what you know, what you do, they go to Washington and frame it as a safety net. Then you start going around safety net, safety net. It is good, but it's your idea, but you don't know what it is.
Right.
So, and the other thing was, in most of this kingdom, it was there was delegation of duties. For example, if it's a problem in the village, then you know it's the headman and the people he work with. If it's in the district, you know it's the head of the district. If it's a central, but most African governments now, and it started again with UNIP, the constitution was changed slowly, so all the powers are in the president. So when the robots don't work, it's the president. When ZESCO doesn't work, it's the president. You know, when water is not running, it's a president. But if you look at the original concept, there was a delegation of duty.
Right.
So if there's a problem, you know exactly where you go to the problem. And that's why, like, for example, this business of one-man show, when a new president is coming in a minute, there is so much excitement. Even if that person inherits a mess which there is no way he can solve alone. In fact, people are so excited because they want this person to solve every problem. Then after 5 years, they look for another messiah. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, so the first thing really, you know, anyway, I told you, I grew up in Usakile, and our parents used to take us to the village. But what really made me more African is going to America at 17. Because I also grew up in a colonial system where you think, you know, I mean, we had a wonderful time in the village. We learned a lot of things. I had a positive influence of the village. But, you know, we thought town life, you know, electricity and water, that kind of thing. But when I went to America at 17, then I studied these people. I met people who were saying, me, I'm French American. Me, I'm Swedish American. Me, I'm Irish American. I said, hey. So it's okay to be an African. And, you know, as for Ireland, they have even Irish Americans. You know, they have dual citizen. President Kennedy was Irish. And, you know, for the Irish, even the president of the US has to wear their flag on Irish Day. So, you know, in America, they started the concept of a melting pot, that you come to America, you build a new country, you are all new. And then the conclusion was that there's no melting pot. You have to be Swedish American, French American. I bring all these French American, Irish together and form America. But in Zambia, it was one Zambia, one nation, which is misplaced. The original idea, how one Zambia, one nation came, people, even governments don't know. So it's interpreted like it's unity, and then it's all slogans. And the first government wanted people to be exactly the same, think the same, agree the same. God made us unique. You can only be creative if you bring your uniqueness. So, right now, for example, I remember when Mwanawasa became president, the people, you know, he was allowed to appoint 8 MPs. Yes. Those MPs were the only ones who were creative. The original MP, because of the Kaunda area of everybody was the same, they were referring they can't even make a decision. I am off. But what I'm saying is that you need, so anyway, when I came back after 5 years in America, then I went to the village full time. And you know what I did? I said, let me go through everything that girls do. You know, some of it was done. I went to the field. I made a mat. I went through that process.
Right.
And besides the history that my parents taught me, that has really helped me to be me. And then when I said yes to Jesus, my identity is so clear. I don't have to be like you. Right. And you don't have to be like me. And I'm comfortable with that. The only way we can make progress, if I learn from you, you learn from me.
Right.
So the foundation, you know, most Zambians don't know their foundation. The grandparents are in Chawama, the parents are in Mufulira, so where are you going to learn? You don't even know where your village, you don't even know your language. Now, this is the thing, another thing that happened post-independence, because post-independence, we introduced the English medium school. Yes. We thought that was progress. So children, even at home, they were speaking English. I remember a family which used to tell their children, if they speak a local language, they say, dirty, 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 dirty. So you have that generation, they don't know their language, they don't know their village because village is a bad thing. And they just listen to donors who, in order to raise funds, have to demonize Africa. Africans are all starving. Africans are this. Then they raise more money for their office than you. So if you don't know yourself, so you need to know your foundation, you need to know yourself. And you see what you are doing now and then you say you have done research, you have gone through the books, you are asking questions, and you have discovered, oh my goodness, what I am doing used to be done.
Yes.
So the idea of development changing for the better has always been there. Even in let's take now the seeds, the food production problem. Right now we fight for maize, right?
Yes.
Somebody even has an audacity to say, I'm going to form a political party. I want to be president. When I'm president, I will lower the price of maize. Is that development? We should be growing our own maize. So part of the development in the village was growing your own food, exchanging good seed. And everybody, like where I come from, as soon as you are born, you are given a cow. Whether you are a man or a woman, a baby girl, a baby boy, you are given a cow, you are given land. That's an investment bank.
Yes.
And then if in the village, this field produces very good seed, we share with the others. And so now when you have the Monsantos who are saying that the original seed is criminal offense, you want to buy their seed. They live in the west part of the US. They don't eat maize. And their maize, you have every year to go and buy. And in fact, in the colonial days, we had shops everywhere, even in the villages, even by Africans. I see now Chinese are running buses. We had the Mwensos in Northern Province in the 40s, 50s with a bus to Lusaka. We have the Kaliafes. We have Mr. Liwali from Mongo. They had buses in the 40s and 50s. So now we need Chinese to run the bus. And you don't even know. All these shops were run, Kablonga supermarket was done by Zambians. And then there was a big shop, big. I mean, today we'll call it a mall, Zambiri, by Zambians. So now, even, and then I heard somebody, I don't know if it was the Minister of Commerce, was saying, yeah, it's okay to be in business, make money. My father had a shop in Lialui and a baker even in Lialui, Mr. Nabuliato, who was the secretary for the African National Congress in 1947, had a shop. The first mayor of Lusaka, Mr. Actually, she had several shops in Shinika. That's why they were not stealing. They were not stealing. They were volunteers. They had jobs. They were making money. It's not new. Multiple streaming of income is also not new.
Yes.
So in conclusion, if you don't know who you are and you don't know your foundation, you are lost. Where are you? You've got to know your history in order to proceed. So, in fact, I am very happy. I'm meeting a lot of young people who are asking questions. Their grandparents and parents have really let them down by allowing them to be raised only in Lusaka, and you just go to Kablonga girls or Kablonga boys, and that's all you know. So whoever comes to tell you something, especially with IT now, the colonial government, their people are using IT now to influence you for bad and for worse. So if you don't know who you are, where you come from, what's good for you, you will be swept and there will be absolutely no progress. Since Africa now is the bread basket of the whole world, everybody is here not because they love you. They want to get your minerals. They are getting I know that some of these universities who are teaching development in Europe, they are using the methods in agriculture. Stop rotation was always there. So now they are teaching it and you pay $2,000 to go for one term. But if you don't know, I mean, I'm not an agriculturist and I live in rural areas. I grow my own maize. I grow my own vegetables. Yeah. And then if you tell me that you want to be president because you lower the price of maize, that's a non-issue to me. I grow my own maize. God has given us the soil, has given us a lot of water. And I grew in an African township. We had vegetables. In those township small places, we had bananas, we had oranges, we had pawpaws. Yeah.
True. Very.
So now, the other day, a lady was saying spinach is very expensive. Spinach. Even in Europe, when we were stuck there, we used to grow vegetables in the kitchen.
What you've shared is so important. You know, the first thing is not just knowing who you are, but also most importantly, and I think that's where even I myself are actually I'm falling short also, is also going through the process. Beyond reading, beyond these conversations, you need to actually experience it. Go to your village, go where you come from, experience those processes, see for yourself, for you to then understand who you are, you know. And it's interesting because I didn't know how this discussion would flow. And one important thing that has really stood out for me, which I didn't actually consider to be a key to development, if I'm being honest, but it's actually the foundation for advancing development. It's knowing who you are and being confident in who you are at an individual level and even as an African. And how do you know who you are? By knowing where you come from and experiencing, not just learning the knowledge, but actually experiencing the system yourself. I think that's so important. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I just wanted to give you one more question or just room to make closing remarks to address our listeners who are a largely young demographic of Africans. They're in business, they're in civil society, they're in corporate, and they're interested in development. They're interested in building this new Africa, even with limited resources. What are your last closing words of motivation? Maybe let me put it that way.
I think what I would tell them, you have summarized by saying you've got to know yourself and your foundation. If you are doing development just in Lusaka, with limited knowledge, I don't think you are doing development. Anyway, let's say development should be people-centered and should be bottom-up, not you coming from Lusaka and going to teach. Yeah, I know. I have heard many young people, I'm going to the rural areas to teach them. That is great. But what are you learning from them? It should be a two-way process.
Yes.
Because development has always been there. We had a president who just announced one day that he is building a university in Mongo. Me, as an educator, I thought it was a good idea. But I went to a village. A reporter from Lusaka came to interview people. And the people were saying, my child is not even in grade 5. So the university is not mine. And then the same president says, I'm building a stadium. And the people said, our children are not in school. We have no health center. You know what I mean?
Stadium, yes.
Yeah, because this being Lusaka urban-centered and doing your development targeted to the donor funding that's available, it is very dangerous. For us, my mother was a pioneer NGO. I am a second-generation NGO. At 22 years, I used to walk every day to the YWCA from Evelyn Horn to work with white teens, walking. Okay, no donors. You know, I shared what I have. And I think some of this danger, if you want to start your development with donor funding, you must be very clever not to be caught in the ring of what they are trying to do.
Right.
So, I mean, you can do development in Lusaka. There are areas where they need help. You know, sit to them, find out why they are doing things, experience them, even spend a night or two there. If they have no water, you know, start from where they are and build your NGO from the people and ask them, you know, these people are more intelligent than us who went to school. How did they survive up
right
now?
Absolutely. Yeah,
learn from them. You know, I really thank God for my rural experience, even as an MP. I have been a rural MP for 10 years. I have learned so much from these people. I am a better person for having been a rural MP because I come from education where every day is a learning experience. So don't go and tell people what to do. Don't go and teach from the donor's perspective. Experience them. Go through what they are going through. Get ideas from them. There is a problem. You address a problem with a solution. That is also development.
This has been such an enlightening and encouraging discussion. Unfortunately, we have to close here, and allow me to close by extending my deepest gratitude to you for taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge. I was thinking to myself as you were talking that you really truly are an embodiment of your names. All of them, like I can see the manifestation of the meanings of your names in your story, in your personality, in your journey, in your career. It's really, and that's why we started this section, also this icebreaker section of just discussing African names, because I've noticed that for most of our guests, when you hear their name and what their name means, and you look at them, their personality and their work, there's actually a connection. And I've seen that again with you, where you are somebody I look up to and aspire to and admire greatly. So I'm so honored that you've taken the time to actually grace our platform. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, and you are off to a good start. I wish you the best, and we want to thank God for this opportunity, and we hope this is useful to other people so that we have meaningful and effective development in our country, Africa. Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.